I never thought my career would become a battlefield. For 5 years, I had been a loyal analyst at Meridian Consulting in London, consistently delivering results without making much noise. I wasn't the type to broadcast my achievements or fight for the spotlight. Instead, I believed my work would speak for itself. How naive I was. Everything changed the day Marcus Cooper joined our team as the new project manager. Tall, confident, with an Oxford accent and connections that reached all the way to the executive floor, Marcus was everything I wasn't. Charismatic, assertive, and politically savvy. Within weeks, he had charmed everyone from the administrative staff to the senior directors. I tried to be friendly, to give him the benefit of the doubt as he settled in. The Philips account was my baby. I had nurtured the relationship for 3 years, turning a modest client into one of our biggest revenue streams. I knew their business inside out, had built trust with their leadership team, and created the analysis models that gave them unprecedented insight into their market position. It wasn't officially my account. Nothing at Meridian was ever officially assigned to analysts, but everyone knew I was the go-to person for Philips. When I returned from a rare 2-week holiday in Cornwall, something felt off. There were glances, whispers that stopped when I approached. Emma from HR avoided eye contact in the lift. It wasn't until the Wednesday team meeting that reality struck like a physical blow. "As you all know," said Richard, our department head, "the Philips presentation last week was a tremendous success. Marcus has really taken their analytics to the next level, and they've committed to a 3-year contract renewal with a substantial increase in services." The room erupted in applause while I sat frozen, trying to process what I was hearing. Marcus smiled modestly, accepting congratulations from colleagues on either side. My spreadsheets, my models, my client relationships. Somehow, in the span of 2 weeks, they had become his breakthrough. I had the advantage of fresh eyes, Marcus was saying, and could see opportunities that might have been overlooked before. Sometimes it takes a new perspective to move things forward. No one looked at me. No one acknowledged that the opportunities he spoke of were built on the foundation of my years of work. It was as if my contribution had been erased, painted over with Marcus's broad, confident brushstrokes. After the meeting, I stood by the coffee machine, hands shaking slightly as I poured a cup I didn't really want. Diane, a senior analyst who had been with the company even longer than I had, approached cautiously. "That was rough," she said quietly, her eyes sympathetic but also wary. "You okay?" "Did no one mention that those were my models? My analytics?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "Did he present them as entirely his work?" Diane hesitated. "He did acknowledge the team's previous work, but very briefly. Then it was all about his enhancements and strategic repositioning. By the end, everyone was so impressed with the results that I don't think anyone was thinking about where it all started." "Did you say anything?" I immediately regretted the edge in my voice when I saw her expression harden. It wasn't my place to speak up in that meeting. And honestly, James, maybe this is a wake-up call. You've always been too quiet about your contributions. In this company, if you don't claim credit, someone else will. She walked away, leaving me with a bitter taste that had nothing to do with the mediocre coffee. I returned to my desk, opened my laptop, and stared at the screen, my mind racing. The Philips account materials were all there in the shared drive, but now each file had been duplicated, modified slightly, and saved with Marcus's name in the file title. A message popped up on my screen. It was from Marcus. "Great foundation on Philips. I've made some improvements. Let's chat about your role going forward when you have a moment." My role going forward. As if I was now the supporting character in what had always been my story. I closed the laptop, gathered my things, and left the office early for the first time in years. Walking along the Thames with the autumn wind whipping around me, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could accept this silent demotion, this theft of my work, or I could fight back. But fighting meant confrontation, politics, and a game I'd never learned to play. By the time I reached my flat in Hackney, a quiet rage had replaced my initial shock. This wasn't just about credit or recognition anymore. It was about survival in a world where being good at your job wasn't enough. You also had to be good at claiming your territory, at making yourself visible. That night I made a decision. Marcus Cooper had declared war without ever acknowledging we were enemies. Fine. If that's how the game was played, I would learn the rules. I would become visible. Starting tomorrow, the real battle would begin. I arrived at the office early the next morning with a strategy. No more invisible work. No more humble acceptance of being overlooked. I'd spent half the night combing through my emails, project notes, and presentations, creating a detailed timeline of my contributions to the Philips account. The other half I'd devoted to reading articles on workplace politics, a subject I'd previously dismissed as beneath me. The irony wasn't lost on me. The morning briefing was my first opportunity. As we gathered in the glass-walled conference room overlooking Canary Wharf, I positioned myself directly across from Marcus, rather than taking my usual seat near the back. When Richard opened the floor for updates, I spoke before anyone else could. "I've been reviewing the Philips Analytics Framework," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "While the presentation last week was impressive, I've identified several areas where the models could be refined further. I've prepared a memo detailing these enhancements." Marcus's smile flickered momentarily. "That's great, James. Perhaps you could send those thoughts my way, and I'll incorporate anything useful into the next client meeting." "Actually," I replied, maintaining eye contact, "since I developed the original algorithms and have the deepest historical knowledge of their data patterns, I think it makes sense for me to lead the follow-up. I've already scheduled a call with Sarah Phillips for tomorrow." A silence fell over the room. Richard looked between us, clearly uncomfortable with the unexpected tension. "Well, that's proactive of you, James. But Marcus is now the primary on Philips." "With all due respect," I countered, sliding copies of my memo across the table, "I've been working with Philips for 3 years. Their current growth trajectory is based on modeling I developed. I believe continuity would serve the client best." Marcus leaned forward, his expression a perfect mask of collegial concern. "James, I understand you feel attached to this client, but sometimes fresh eyes bring new value. The leadership team agreed with my approach last week, and we should respect that decision." I noticed how skillfully he'd aligned himself with leadership, while painting me as emotionally attached rather than professionally invested. This was the game: words as weapons, alliances as armor. "I'm not questioning the value of your input, Marcus," I said, calling on reserves of diplomacy I didn't know I had. "I'm suggesting a collaboration that leverages both your fresh perspective and my deep client knowledge. Unless there's some reason you'd prefer to exclude that expertise." The challenge hung in the air. To reject collaboration would make him appear territorial. To accept would acknowledge my rightful place in the project. I watched him calculate his options with an almost admirable precision. "Collaboration sounds ideal," he finally said, voice warm, though his eyes remained cold. "Let's sync after this meeting." Richard nodded, visibly relieved. "Excellent. Moving on." The meeting continued, but the dynamic had shifted. Several colleagues glanced my way with new curiosity, perhaps seeing me clearly for the first time. I caught Diane's eye, and she gave me a subtle nod of approval. Marcus cornered me by the espresso machine afterward. "Bold move," he said quietly, maintaining his public smile. "But I'd be careful about forcing your way into client relationships. It can come across as desperate." "I'm not forcing my way in," I replied calmly. "I'm simply maintaining my position on work I developed. There's plenty of credit to go around without taking mine." His smile tightened. "Look, James, I'm trying to help you. Your technical skills are solid, but you lack vision. The Philips renewal happened because I showed them possibilities you never imagined. Don't make this personal." "It became personal when you removed my name from my own files," I said. "I'm not looking for a fight, Marcus, but I won't be erased." A colleague approached, ending our conversation before Marcus could respond. Throughout the day, I made my presence felt in ways both subtle and direct. I spoke up in meetings, circulated insights to the team, and most importantly, emailed senior leadership with an update on the Philips account that clearly delineated my foundational work from Marcus's recent additions. By late afternoon, I received a message from Catherine Walsh, the director of our division, someone who had rarely acknowledged my existence before. "Interesting analysis on Philips. Stop by my office tomorrow 10 a.m. I was navigating unfamiliar waters. Previously, I'd believed that merit alone would carry me forward. Now I was learning that visibility required deliberate action, strategic thinking, and sometimes confrontation. It wasn't comfortable, but neither was watching someone else claim the fruits of my labor. That evening, as I walked home along Borough Market, passing vendors closing their stalls after a long day, I felt a strange mix of pride and unease. I had stood my ground, but I'd also entered a contest whose rules I was still learning. Marcus had years of practice at corporate chess. I was just making my first moves. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "Drinks at the Anchor? Could use your ear on something." I hesitated, then replied affirmatively. Allies would be crucial in the coming days. And perhaps Diane, who had navigated Meridian's politics for years, could help me understand what I was really up against. The old pub was crowded with Thursday evening regulars, but Diane had secured a quiet corner table. She pushed a pint toward me as I sat down. "To finding your voice," she said, raising her glass. "Is that what I did today?" I asked. "Or did I just start a war I can't win?" Diane studied me carefully. "You finally realize that being good at your job isn't enough. That's progress. But Marcus isn't your real problem." "What do you mean?" "Marcus is just playing the game the way Meridian rewards it. The question is, can you play it without becoming someone you don't recognize?" She took a long sip of her beer. "Because I've seen what happens to people who cross that line." Catherine Walsh's office occupied the corner of the 32nd floor, with windows overlooking the Thames and the London skyline beyond. I'd been inside exactly twice before, once during my initial interview 5 years ago, and again when our team won a small industry award last year. Both times I'd stood among others. This time, I faced her alone. "James," she said, gesturing toward the chair opposite her desk without looking up from her monitor. "One moment." I sat silently, taking in the minimalist decor, everything in shades of gray and white, no personal photos, nothing that revealed anything about the woman who'd run the division with clinical efficiency for the past decade. After a full minute of typing, she finally turned her attention to me. "Your memo on Phillips was enlightening," she said, getting straight to the point. "Not because of the analytics, though they were solid. What interested me was that I've never seen anything like this from you before. I wasn't sure if this was criticism or praise. I've submitted similar analyses in the past." "No," she corrected firmly. "You've submitted technical work. Excellent technical work. But you've never once highlighted your own contributions so explicitly. The question is, why now?" There was no point in being anything but direct. "Because my work was being presented as someone else's. By Marcus Cooper." It wasn't a question. "Yes." She leaned back, studying me with new interest. "You know, when we hired Marcus, Richard argued against it, said the team was functioning well already. I overruled him because functioning isn't enough. We needed someone who could sell our work, not just do it well. So you brought in someone to take credit for other people's efforts?" I regretted the words as soon as they left my mouth. To my surprise, Catherine laughed. "I brought in someone who understands that perception matters as much as reality in this business. Marcus knows how to make clients feel confident, how to make our work seem not just necessary but visionary." She paused. What I didn't expect was that he'd erase contributions rather than elevate them. She tapped a folder on her desk. "I've reviewed the file history. It's clear that the core framework is yours. It's equally clear that Marcus made significant strategic improvements in how it was packaged and positioned." "I don't dispute that," I admitted. But you want recognition for your foundation," she finished for me. "Fair enough. However, there's a larger question here, James. 5 years, and I barely knew your name before yesterday. That's not entirely Marcus's fault, is it?" The truth of her words stung. I'd been invisible by choice long before Marcus arrived. I'd prioritized work over workplace politics, substance over self-promotion. "No," I acknowledged. "It's not." Catherine nodded, seemingly satisfied with my candor. "Here's my dilemma. I need Marcus's skills. I also need people who can build robust analytics like yours. What I don't need is internal warfare distracting from client deliverables." "I'm not interested in warfare," I said. "I just want fair attribution for my work." "Fair attribution," she repeated thoughtfully. "Let me be blunt, James. In this industry, people who need to demand credit rarely advance. People who command it naturally do. Is that why you called me here? To tell me to step back and let Marcus take over?" She smiled slightly. Actually, I called you here because for the first time in 5 years you forced me to notice you. That's not nothing. She opened a drawer and pulled out another folder. We're pitching Harrington Financial next week. They need a complete analytics overhaul similar to what you built for Philips but more complex. I'm putting you in charge with Marcus as strategic advisor. My pulse quickened. Harrington was twice the size of Philips, a potential game changer for our division. Why me? Because this is your shot to show me you can do more than build models in the shadows. I want to see if you can lead, present, and own the client relationship from start to finish. And yes, work effectively with Marcus, who could learn a thing or two from your technical rigor. It wasn't exactly an apology for what had happened with Philips, but it was an opportunity, perhaps a test. And Marcus has agreed to this arrangement? Marcus works for me, not the other way around, she said simply. He'll follow my direction. The question is whether you're ready to step into the spotlight you suddenly seem to want. I left Catherine's office with mixed emotions. The Harrington opportunity was significant, but working with Marcus would be challenging at best, toxic at worst. As I headed toward my desk, I spotted him in the break room, holding court with several colleagues. Our eyes met briefly through the glass. He raised his coffee cup in a mock toast, his smile never reaching his eyes. Diane intercepted me before I could return to my workspace. How did it go with Walsh? I guided her toward the stairwell, away from curious ears. She's given me the Harrington pitch. Her eyebrows shot up. As led? Yes, with Marcus as strategic advisor. Bloody hell, she whispered. That's either a massive opportunity or a setup. I finished. I know. What are you going to do? I thought about Catherine's words about commanding recognition, about Marcus's skill at selling ideas, about my own history of hiding behind my work. I'm going to prove I can do this without becoming like him. And if that's not possible? Diane asked softly. If the only way to succeed here is to play by their rules. It was the question I'd been avoiding. What was I willing to compromise? Where would I draw the line? As we descended the stairs, I realized I didn't have a clear answer yet. Only the certainty that the next few weeks would force me to find one. Then I'll have a different decision to make, I said finally. But first I need to see this through. That afternoon, an email from Marcus arrived. James, congratulations on Harrington. Catherine tells me we'll be working together. Let's align on approach tomorrow, 9 a.m. I have some initial ideas already that I think you'll find useful. The subtext was clear. He was already positioning himself to shape the project. But this time, I had Catherine's explicit backing and a determination I'd never felt before. I replied, looking forward to our collaboration. I've already begun drafting the technical framework and client approach. I'll walk you through my vision at 9, and we can discuss how your strategic skills can enhance it. Direct, clear ownership, professional. It felt foreign to write this way, but also strangely liberating. I stayed late that night, sketching out the Harrington approach with a thoroughness that left no room for misinterpretation about who was creating the foundation. As the office emptied and the lights of London glittered below, I realized that this wasn't just about Harrington, or even about Marcus. It was about finding out what kind of professional I wanted to be, and what lines I would and wouldn't cross to become that person. The Harrington pitch was scheduled for just 11 days away, an impossibly tight timeline for a client of that magnitude. I arrived at the office before dawn the next morning, determined to establish momentum before my meeting with Marcus. The quiet hours before the usual bustle allowed me to focus, mapping out an approach that played to our complementary strengths without leaving room for ambiguity about leadership. At precisely 9 a.m., Marcus strolled into the small conference room I'd booked, 2 coffees in hand. He placed one in front of me, prepared exactly as I liked it. Thought you might need this, he said with that practiced smile. Late night? I accepted the coffee without comment. This small gesture of consideration, remembering how I took my coffee, was precisely the kind of detail that made Marcus effective. It didn't mean he was genuine, but it did mean he was observant. I've outlined our approach, I said, sliding a printed document across to him. I'd like to walk you through it before we discuss modifications. He raised an eyebrow but didn't object. For the next 30 minutes, I detailed the technical architecture I envisioned for Harrington, a multi-layered analytics framework, that would integrate their fragmented data systems while providing predictive insights they currently lacked. I spoke with a confidence I didn't entirely feel, but I knew the material cold. This was my territory. When I finished, Marcus leaned back, tapping his pen against the document. Technically sound, he admitted, but Harrington won't care about half of these specifications. They should, I countered. These capabilities will transform their decision-making process. Should and will are different things, James. He leaned forward. Clients like Harrington don't buy capabilities. They buy confidence. They want to feel certain we understand their problems better than they do themselves. His words irritated me because they contained a kernel of truth I'd always resisted. So you suggest we prioritize style over substance? Marcus surprised me with a genuine laugh. God, you really do think in binaries, don't you? It's not either or. The best pitches deliver both. He flipped to the last page of my document. Your approach is solid, but it needs a narrative that connects to their specific pain points, which are, their CFO is under pressure from the board to show digital transformation with tangible ROI. Their risk assessment processes are prehistoric compared to competitors, and they're terrified of losing market share to fintech startups. He tapped the table for emphasis. Those are the problems we need to solve. Your technical framework is just the means. I'd expected antagonism, not insight. How do you know all this? I had drinks with their director of strategy last month, old university connection. He shrugged as if it were nothing. This is what I bring to the table, James. You know how to build the solution. I know how to position it. For a moment, I glimpsed what a genuine collaboration might look like. His network and strategic instincts paired with my technical expertise. It was almost enough to make me reconsider my wariness. Almost. That's valuable intelligence, I acknowledged. But I need your word that this remains my pitch, with you in support. No revising slides at the last minute. No sidelining me during the presentation. His expression hardened slightly. Catherine's directive was clear. Your lead, I'm support. But understand something. My reputation is also on the line here. If this fails because you're too rigid to incorporate my input, that reflects on both of us. I'm not rigid, I said. I just won't be steamrolled. There's a difference. The tension between us was palpable, but also strangely productive. Over the next hour, we hammered out a compromise approach that maintained the technical integrity I insisted on, while addressing the strategic elements Marcus identified. By the time we finished, we had the outline of something potentially remarkable. As we gathered our materials to leave, Marcus paused at the door. I underestimated you, he said, his tone impossible to read. It won't happen again. I couldn't tell if it was respect, a warning, or both. The following days blurred together in a frenzy of preparation. I led daily working sessions with a small team pulled together for the pitch. To my surprise, Marcus played his role perfectly, offering strategic refinements but publicly deferring to my leadership. When he disagreed with my approach, he did so privately, often with compelling reasoning that improved our work. Diane caught me late one evening as I was reviewing the final presentation draft. You two seem to have reached détente, she observed, perching on the edge of my desk. It's pragmatic, I replied. We both want to win Harrington. And after that, if you land this client, you'll be working with him for months, possibly years. I hadn't allowed myself to think that far ahead. One battle at a time. She studied me with concern. Just be careful. The more success you have with this approach, the harder it becomes to step back from it. I've seen it happen before. People who start playing the game as a means to an end, only to find the game becomes the end itself. Her warning stayed with me as I headed home that night, cutting through St. James's Park as a shortcut. The autumn chill had deepened, leaves crunching underfoot as I walked. I found myself wondering what it would mean to succeed on these terms. Would winning Harrington validate my approach or just pull me deeper into corporate politics I'd always disdained? The night before the pitch, I received an unexpected call from Catherine Walsh. Are you ready? She asked without preamble. Yes, I answered, surprised she'd called personally rather than sending Richard or an assistant to check in. Good, because Harrington just confirmed that their CEO will be attending. He wasn't originally scheduled to be there. My stomach tightened. The CEO's presence raised the stakes considerably. Does Marcus know? I've informed him. There was a pause. James, I want to be clear about something. This opportunity came your way because you finally showed initiative. But that doesn't mean the past 5 years disappear. Marcus has proven his value repeatedly. You haven't. Not at this level. Her meaning was clear. I was still the underdog in this scenario, regardless of my temporary lead position. I understand, I said carefully. We'll deliver tomorrow. See that you do. Both of you. The call ended, leaving me with a nagging sense of inequity. Despite my years of solid work, despite being given lead on this pitch, I was still fighting an uphill battle for recognition. Marcus, with his connections and polish, would always have an advantage in a culture that valued perception as much as substance. As I made final preparations that night, a realization slowly crystallized. Perhaps the problem wasn't just Marcus, or even Catherine. Perhaps it was a system that inherently favored certain types of contributions over others. And if that was true, then my options were starker than I'd acknowledged. Either adapt to that reality or find somewhere that valued what I brought to the table on its own merits. But first, there was tomorrow, and tomorrow would determine which of those paths remained open to me. Harrington Financial's headquarters occupied a modernist glass tower in Canary Wharf, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces. Our team arrived 90 minutes early, setting up in their executive boardroom while trying to project calm competence. I ran through my sections one last time, making minor adjustments to the slide deck, while Marcus chatted easily with Harrington's administrative staff, gathering last-minute intelligence on who would be attending. Michael Chen is definitely coming, he murmured to me as we arranged materials at the head of the table. CEO, notoriously detail-oriented, expects precise answers, not generalities. I nodded, grateful for the insight despite my lingering wariness. Anything else I should know? He has a background in data science before he moved to management. He'll understand the technical aspects better than most executives. That changed the dynamics considerably. I'd prepared to simplify the technical explanation, but if Chen had a data background, I could speak more directly to the architecture's sophistication. I quickly mentally recalibrated my approach. Thanks, I said, meaning it. Marcus straightened his tie. We're partners today, James. Whatever else, remember that. The Harrington team filed in at exactly 10 a.m. 8 executives led by Sarah Harrington, CFO and our primary contact. Last through the door was Michael Chen, smaller in person than his reputation suggested, with piercing eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they fell upon. Catherine Walsh arrived with Richard, taking seats at the back of the room in a clear signal. This was our show to run. I began the presentation with a brief overview of Meridian's approach, then moved directly into Harrington's challenges, naming the specific pain points Marcus had identified. The executives exchanged glances. We'd hit a nerve. These aren't just general industry problems, I continued. They're specific to Harrington's position. Your legacy systems are creating data silos that prevent you from identifying correlations between market shifts and customer behavior. Meanwhile, your competitors are moving to real-time analytics that allow them to adjust strategy dynamically. I paused, making eye contact with Chen. But you have an advantage they don't. 20 years of historical data that, properly leveraged, could provide predictive insights no startup could match. What you lack isn't data, it's architecture. The room was silent, all eyes focused on the visualizations I'd prepared showing the transformation we proposed. When I finished outlining the technical approach, I smoothly transitioned to Marcus, who detailed implementation timelines and expected outcomes with polished precision. We moved between segments like dance partners who'd rehearsed for months rather than days. Then came the questions. Harrington's CTO probed the scalability of our solution. Their head of risk challenged our security protocols. I answered with specific technical detail, occasionally deferring to Marcus on strategic implications. It was going well, better than well, until Chen spoke for the first time. This framework, he said, gesturing to my architecture diagram, it resembles the Bradford model. Are you concerned about the same bottlenecks they encountered? The Bradford model was obscure, a theoretical approach that had never gained widespread adoption due to processing limitations. That Chen recognized its influence in our work was both impressive and potentially concerning. You have a good eye, I replied, surprised but pleased by the technical challenge. We've incorporated elements of Bradford's architecture but modified the data processing layer to address exactly those bottlenecks. If I may, I stepped to the whiteboard and quickly sketched the modification, explaining how our approach diverged from Bradford's original concept. Chen watched intently, occasionally nodding. When I finished, he asked 3 rapid-fire technical questions that would have been unintelligible to most executives. I answered each one directly, feeling increasingly confident. "Interesting approach," Chen said finally. "Who developed this modification?" "I did," I answered simply. "And you're confident it resolves the throughput issues that plagued the original model?" "We've stress-tested it extensively." "Yes." Chen turned to Marcus. "And your assessment of the business impact?" Without missing a beat, Marcus outlined how the technical architecture would translate to specific business outcomes: faster decision-making, reduced risk exposure, competitive advantage. He was brilliant, framing my technical work in terms of concrete value that resonated with everyone in the room. "We have other presentations scheduled today," Chen said when we finished. "But this has been enlightening." He looked between Marcus and me. "You work well together." As we packed up our materials after the Harrington team departed, Catherine approached. "Nicely done," she said, her version of effusive praise, "particularly your handling of Chen's questions. Not many people could have addressed that level of technical challenge on the fly." "James was remarkable," Marcus said, surprising me with what seemed like genuine admiration. "I wouldn't have been able to navigate that particular line of questioning." Catherine nodded, and Marcus framed the business case perfectly. "This is why I put you two together." She checked her watch. "We should know their decision by early next week. In the meantime, well done." As Catherine and Richard departed, Marcus and I found ourselves alone in the boardroom. The tension that had defined our relationship seemed momentarily suspended, replaced by the shared adrenaline of a pitch well delivered. "Drink?" he suggested. "I'd say we've earned it." I hesitated, then nodded. "Why not?" The Lamb and Flag was quiet at mid-afternoon. Just a few patrons scattered among the wooden tables. We found a corner spot, Marcus returning from the bar with 2 pints. "2 successful collaborations," he said, raising his glass. I clinked mine against it, still wary but also curious. In the dim pub light, away from the office politics, he seemed almost approachable. "The Bradford reference," he said after a long sip. "That was obscure. How did you know about it?" "My thesis at Imperial was on theoretical data architecture models," I admitted. "Bradford was one of the cases I studied. Brilliant concept, flawed execution. Like many things," Marcus observed. He studied me for a moment. "You know, if we get Harrington, this could change your trajectory at Meridian considerably." "If we get Harrington," I echoed, emphasizing the uncertainty. "Oh, we'll get it," he said with characteristic confidence. "Chen was impressed, and he's the decision maker. The others will follow his lead." I took another drink, considering my next words carefully. "Why did you do it? With Phillips?" "You could have built on my work without erasing my contribution." The directness of my question seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment, his polished veneer slipped. "Because that's how I was taught the game is played," he answered, surprising me with his candor. "At my last firm, credit was a zero-sum game. You claimed as much territory as possible because if you didn't, someone else would claim it, including yours. And you don't see anything wrong with that approach?" I pressed. "I didn't say that." He rotated his glass slowly. "Look, I saw an opportunity with Phillips and I took it. I didn't expect pushback from you based on your history of..." He paused. "Invisibility," I supplied. "Exactly. But today showed me something different." He leaned forward. "You have technical depth I can't match. I have strategic instincts and connections you haven't developed. Together, we're more effective than either of us alone. Are you proposing a truce?" "I'm proposing a partnership, one where we each play to our strengths without undermining the other." I wanted to believe him. The Harrington pitch had revealed the potential power of genuine collaboration. But 5 years of corporate life had taught me caution, especially with someone who had already proven willing to claim others' work. "I'll consider it," I said finally. "But trust has to be earned, not just proposed." He nodded, accepting the boundary. As we finished our drinks, the conversation shifted to other topics: projects, colleagues, even a bit about our lives outside of Meridian. By the time we parted ways, something had changed. Not friendship exactly, but perhaps a mutual respect that hadn't existed before. Walking home along the river, watching the city lights shimmer on the dark water, I felt strangely unsettled. The day had been a professional triumph, possibly a career-defining moment, yet it had also revealed uncomfortable truths about the world I worked in. A world where technical brilliance alone wasn't enough, where perception and politics were just as crucial as substance. The question that had been forming since my confrontation with Marcus now crystallized more clearly. Could I learn to navigate that reality without compromising what I valued? Or would each step toward visibility inevitably erode the principles that had once seemed so clear? The email from Catherine Walsh arrived Monday morning, marked high priority. Team, Harrington Financial has awarded Meridian the analytics contract, effective immediately. James will serve as technical lead, with Marcus as client strategy director. Meeting in my office, 11 a.m. to discuss next steps. I stared at the message on my screen, an unexpected tightness in my chest. We'd won. After years of anonymous effort, I would lead one of the firm's most significant projects. The recognition I'd craved was finally materializing. Congratulatory messages poured in from colleagues, many from people who had barely acknowledged my existence before. Diane squeezed my shoulder as she passed my desk. "Told you," she said simply. Marcus arrived at Catherine's office exactly as I did. "Congratulations," he said, extending his hand. "Looks like we made quite the impression." Catherine got straight to business once we were seated. "Harrington wants immediate action." Michael Chen specifically mentioned the technical architecture as their deciding factor. She nodded toward me. "Your modifications to the Bradford model apparently convinced him we had unique capabilities." Pride warmed me briefly before she continued. "They've assigned their innovation team to work with us directly. Daily contact, full transparency on progress. We'll need dedicated space for the joint team." She slid folders across to each of us. "Budget, timeline, deliverables. Review and come back with an implementation plan by Thursday." As we left Catherine's office, Marcus suggested lunch to discuss our approach. The restaurant he chose was upscale. White tablecloths, hushed conversations, wait staff who appeared silently when needed and vanished when not. Not my usual fare, but I was beginning to understand these settings were as much about signaling status as about the food. "So," Marcus said after we'd ordered, "technical lead. Quite a promotion from invisible analyst. And client strategy director," I countered. "Created just for you." He smiled. "Catherine knows how to structure things to maximize everyone's contributions." I opened the folder Catherine had given me, scanning the first few pages. "This timeline is ambitious. That's why we're both needed," Marcus replied, moving seamlessly into work mode. "I'll handle client expectations and communication flow. You focus on building the technical framework and managing the development team." It sounded reasonable, a clean division of responsibilities that played to our respective strengths. Yet something felt off. A nagging doubt I couldn't quite articulate. "I want full visibility into client communications," I said. "No separate meetings or side conversations that I'm not aware of." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Still don't trust me?" "Trust but verify," I replied evenly. "That's how partnerships work." "Fair enough," he conceded. "And I want the same courtesy. Technical developments shared promptly. No surprises when I'm facing the client." We spent the next hour outlining a collaborative approach, one that maintained clear boundaries while ensuring neither of us operated in isolation. On paper, it was exactly the kind of professional relationship I should have wanted. Respected for my expertise, positioned for visibility, partnered with someone whose skills complemented my own. So why did it feel like a compromise I wasn't sure I wanted to make? The answers began to emerge over the following weeks as the Harrington project got underway. A dedicated project room was established with dual workstations positioned at its center, Marcus's and mine, a physical manifestation of our shared leadership. The team expanded to include 5 developers, 2 data scientists, and a project manager, all reporting jointly to us. The work itself was challenging and engaging. Harrington's data systems were even more fragmented than we'd anticipated, requiring innovative approaches to integration. I found myself working long hours, energized by the technical complexity and the rare opportunity to build something transformative from the ground up. Marcus proved to be a surprisingly effective partner. True to our agreement, he kept me fully informed of client communications, even forwarding emails for my review before sending them. He shielded the technical team from unnecessary client politics, translating business requirements into clear directives that respected our development process. Most surprisingly, he gave credit generously, ensuring my name was prominently featured in all project documentation, explicitly acknowledging my technical contributions in client meetings, even correcting a Harrington executive who referred to a key innovation as Marcus's approach. Actually, he'd said smoothly, that particular solution was James's design. He's the architectural genius behind this project. Each small moment of recognition should have felt like victory. This was what I'd fought for, wasn't it? Visibility, acknowledgement, respect for my contributions. Yet as weeks passed, a strange hollowness grew where satisfaction should have been. The politics of recognition. Who got credit? Who was mentioned in which meeting? Whose name appeared on which document had become a constant preoccupation. I found myself spending hours crafting emails not for clarity, but for perception, reviewing presentation slides not just for technical accuracy, but for how they positioned my role. One evening, as the office emptied around us, Diane stopped by the project room. She surveyed the whiteboards covered in my diagrams, the progress charts, the team photos already accumulating on the walls. "Quite the operation you've built," she observed. "It's coming together," I acknowledged. "The client seems pleased with our progress." She studied me carefully. "And you? Are you pleased?" The question caught me off guard. "Of course. This is exactly what I wanted." "Is it?" She perched on the edge of my desk. "You look exhausted, James. And not just physically." I started to dismiss her concern, then stopped myself. If anyone would understand, it was Diane. "I'm spending more time managing perceptions than solving problems," I admitted quietly, making sure my contributions are visible, that my role is clear, that the narrative reflects reality. "Welcome to corporate leadership," she said with a sad smile. "Is this what it's always like? Constantly looking over your shoulder, protecting your position, managing how others see you?" "Not everywhere," she said after a thoughtful pause. "But at places like Meridian?" "Yes, more or less." "How do you stand it?" The question emerged more desperately than I'd intended. Diane sighed. "Most people either embrace it or leave. The ones who stay too long without accepting the game often become bitter, suspicious. They see conspiracies in everyday interactions, betrayal in ordinary mistakes." Her words struck uncomfortably close to how I'd felt watching Marcus with Phillips. Was that where this path led? To perpetual vigilance, constant political maneuvering, success defined more by perception than substance? "There are other options," Diane continued, as if reading my thoughts. "Other firms with different cultures. Places where technical excellence is valued for itself, not just for how it can be packaged and positioned. You've thought about leaving?" I was surprised. Diane had always seemed so embedded in Meridian's fabric. "I think about it regularly," she admitted. "But inertia is powerful, and change is frightening. So I stay, adapting as best I can without completely surrendering who I am." Her words stayed with me long after she left. That night, walking home through streets glistening with recent rain, I found myself at an unexpected crossroads. The Harrington project was a professional triumph by any measure. I had the recognition I'd fought for, a clear path to advancement at Meridian, even a workable partnership with Marcus. Yet something essential felt at risk, some core principle that had guided my work even when no one was watching. The satisfaction of solving difficult problems for their own sake. The integrity of creation uncomplicated by politics. The freedom to focus on substance rather than appearance. Perhaps most troubling was how easily I'd adapted to the new reality. Each small compromise had seemed reasonable, necessary, even smart. Visibility came with requirements. Recognition demanded maintenance. Leadership entailed politics. Each step had been a rational response to the environment I found myself in. But taken together, they were reshaping me into someone I wasn't sure I recognized or wanted to become. As I reached my flat, phone buzzing with yet another after-hours email requiring political calculation rather than technical insight, I realized I was approaching a decision point that had nothing to do with Harrington Financial or Meridian Consulting. It was about what kind of professional, what kind of person I ultimately wanted to be.